Senator Ted Cruz, welcome to North Dakota.
Yeah, it's very good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
And this is your first trip here.
It is, and it is beautiful. I'm glad to be here.
So if I had to do a little word association in North Dakota as you're flying in, what do you expect? What do you think you were going to see?
Look, I expected to see beautiful countryside and also good people with good common sense values. And I'll tell you, North Dakota is now a booming energy mecca. And as a Texan, that is something that I respect and admire and I'm very, very familiar with.
Kind of giving you guys a race now at number 2 there in energy production in the U.S., right?
Well, that's a good competition to have, and I wouldn't mind seeing both of us double those numbers.
Yeah, no kidding. So a lot of our listeners have asked me to ask you questions. Most of them related to the race, right? Like the delegate count and the race to Cleveland and how's this going to happen and, you know, I mean, all the questions I'm sure your team is dealing with, but just give us your overview of the state of the race.
Well, I feel very encouraged where we are. We started out a year ago with 17 candidates in the race. I mean, it was a fantastic field. It was young, it was talented, it was diverse, it was dynamic. And over the course of the year, the primary did what primaries are supposed to do. It narrowed the field. This is now effectively a two-person race. There are only 2 candidates, me and Donald Trump, who have any plausible path whatsoever to winning the nomination. And what we're seeing happening, I think both in North Dakota and across the country, is the 65 to 70% of Republicans who recognize that nominating Donald Trump would be a disaster. That if we nominate Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton wins. And she doesn't just win, she wins by a big margin. She wins by double digits. What we're seeing is that 65 to 70% of Republicans are uniting behind our campaign. So the momentum we've got right now is really incredible. It's growing every day, and we're bringing the party together behind a positive, optimistic, conservative vision to bring back jobs, to bring back economic growth, to raise wages, to defend our freedom and our Bill of Rights, and to keep America safe and secure from radical Islamic terrorism.
And obviously you're seeing that in the polls in Wisconsin for sure, and some other places. I guess the question, the follow-up is, okay, does that translate into what? Does that get you across the finish line for a majority of the delegates, or is that out of the picture at this point, and the idea is preventing Mr. Trump from getting a majority and then having a number of votes at the delegation? How about from that standpoint, where are we at?
So they're one of 2 paths we can go forward. We still have a clear path to 1,237 delegates, which is a majority, and to winning that before the convention. So that's plan A. That's what we're working to do.
Is that a big lift, though? Is that still like 80% of the delegates remaining?
It is a big lift, but it's not as big as some in the news media suggest. For Donald to get to 1,237, he needs 54% of the remaining delegates. To date, he's only gotten 46%. So if he does what he's done so far, he will fall short. In fact, he'll fall short by a pretty significant margin. On the other hand, for us to get there, I need 78%. Now, 78% sounds like a high threshold, but it actually overstates how difficult it is to do, because most of the upcoming states are either winner take all or winner take most. So, for example, last week I won in Utah. We won with a good margin. We got 100% of the delegates, all 40 of the delegates, because we won. You look at Wisconsin coming up on Tuesday. The latest polling, 2 different polls, show us 10 points up in Wisconsin. If those polls hold, we are likely to get most, if not all, of the delegates out of Wisconsin. And so going forward, if we continue to beat Donald, we can get 78%. We can get the delegates we need to hit 1,237 before the convention. But Plan B is nobody gets 1,237. And there's a real possibility that both Donald and I fall short. If that happens, we will go into the convention with me having a ton of delegates, with him having a ton of delegates, and then it'll be a battle to see who can earn a majority. And I'll tell you, in that scenario, I feel very confident that we will earn a majority, the 1,237 of the delegates elected by the people, and I'm certainly hopeful that among those are North Dakota's 28 unbound delegates. It could easily be the case that North Dakota has the deciding voice between me and Donald Trump. And if we nominate Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton wins. If I'm the nominee, we beat Hillary Clinton and we turn this country around.
A caller this week to our show, who's a supporter of yours, has gone a little weary, is how he put it, because of the growing establishment support for you. And he said he doesn't trust them. He said that they're likely only doing it to stop Trump and bring on a fresh face at the convention, which we heard, ironically, that exact term being used this week. Do you welcome establishment support, or is it more Trump opposition than Cruz support?
Listen, we welcome everyone's support. We are trying to bring together a majority. And to bring together a majority, you've got to bring everyone together. We've got to unify that 65 to 70% who recognize that nominating Trump is a bad mistake. Now, your caller is absolutely right. Are there D.C. deal makers who would love at a convention to parachute in their own preferred choice? Listen, they despise me. They would love a Washington deal maker, but that's not going to happen. That is only in the fevered dreams of Washington, D.C. Number one, if it did happen, if they brought in somebody who hadn't won any states, who hadn't earned the support of the voters, you would get a revolt. You'd get a revolt from the voters, and quite rightly. Democracy matters. The votes of the people matter. But number two, it's mathematically impossible. To become the Republican nominee, you have to get a majority of the delegates, 1,237. Donald and I together will have over 80% of those delegates. For that theory to work, you'd have to have 1,000 of Donald's delegates or thousands of my delegates suddenly running and saying, we want a Washington deal maker. That's not going to happen. There are only going to be, I believe, two names on the ballot, mine and Donald Trump. It's going to be a straightforward binary choice. And we welcome the support from everyone to come together and say, listen, we can get together behind a shared set of common sense conservative values. My priorities are number one, jobs and economic growth, bringing jobs back to America, raising wages, expanding opportunity for young people. And we do that by reducing the burdens of Washington on small businesses, by tax reform and regulatory reform, by repealing Obamacare, by reining in the EPA and the federal regulators. And I'll tell you, when it comes to the energy sector, we are going to prohibit the federal government from regulating fracking. The states can do that just fine. We're going to keep the feds out of the way, and we're going to open up new lands to new energy exploration, which will yield yet a growing energy renaissance. Raising wages and expanding jobs is my number one priority as president, and I think it's the number one priority of the vast majority of Americans.
North Dakota's economy, as I'm sure you're aware, is very tied to commodities. Our economy goes by the commodities, right, and where they're at. And obviously oil prices are down. Ag prices are down right now. One area that's really, really important in North Dakota and that economy, especially where you're at today, the Red River Valley, is sugar. And I have tons of listeners who are, their livelihood, their future is in sugar. Many believe you are vehemently opposed to the sugar program. I want to first ask you if that's accurate.
Well, look, my view on sugar, and let me give you my broader view on government programs generally. I think we should be removing barriers to expanding marketplaces, to growing, to expanding agriculture. But I don't believe we should have government picking winners and losers. So I don't think you should have subsidies and federal mandates for any programs. And I think that in the long term ends up benefiting everybody, and it benefits ag in particular.
Well, I agree. The problem is our competitors, right? So here's what they would say from the industry. Should they not be expected to compete? How should they not be expected to compete with the billions of dollars in subsidies that come from Brazil and Thailand and other sugar supporters that they're giving, right, to their producers? So their governments are saying, here's big checks. Here's what one grower said: thinking about how important sugar is to us, should we be prepared to abandon our own import protections when the larger exporters keep getting all of these government subsidies?
Well, look, I think that is a very good question. And if you look at our trade policy, it's one of the things that has been badly messed up under the Obama administration, is that our trade policy is not looking out for U.S. workers. So what happens is we end up letting in foreign goods, letting in foreign crops in vast numbers, and many times they're subsidized, as they are with foreign sugar. And yet, this administration has done a terrible job of opening up foreign markets to get our goods into their markets, that they block our goods at the same time while flooding our market. That doesn't make any sense. We need a president who's looking out for Americans first. You know, a few months ago, I sat down with a lot of the senior leadership of John Deere, and they were telling me about how difficult it is to sell tractors in China. They said, theoretically, American tractors can be sold in China. But the problem is the local provincial governments, they'll change the regulations, they'll change the spec orders, and adjust it so that only Chinese tractors meet them.
And we build better tractors.
We build better tractors, but they know exactly what they're doing, and they'll adjust it so, you know, the wheel has to be X diameter rather than Y diameter, and oh look, it's only the Chinese tractor that meets those specifications. And right now, our competitors are eating our lunch. because this president is not fighting for the working men and women of this country.
But aren't you making an argument for you're making the same argument they are to say, hey, it's unfair. They're manipulating the market. They're pouring all these monies in. And if you take away our sugar program, now we can't compete and the industry goes away.
Well, look, I think we can compete here at home. Now, it's a very good question about not allowing goods to come in when it's not on a level playing field. And, you know, one of the important things about my tax plan, anyone who wants to see the tax plan I'm campaigning on, it's a simple flat tax, but it is what's called border adjustable, which means if you're exporting goods, if you're exporting sugar, if you're exporting crops, if you're manufacturing and exporting, 100% of exports are tax-free. On the other hand, all imports coming into this country pay the 16% business flat tax. That means suddenly we have exports and imports fighting on a level playing field. That is going to result in millions of new jobs coming back to America. And let me say also to farmers and ranchers, listen, I represent Texas. Texas is a huge ag state. We've got vast numbers of farmers and ranchers. It's very, very important to us. And when it comes to our farming and ranching community, it's fundamental to food stability. It's fundamental to the strength of our economy, the strength of our middle class. If you look right now at the burdens that are hitting farmers, Washington is making it harder and harder for a family farmer to survive. You look at the EPA. As president, I will rescind the Waters of the United States rule. One of the most oppressive rules coming from the Obama administration. They're trying to turn a puddle or a drainage ditch into navigable water.
It hits energy too.
It hits energy in a devastating way. And we have never seen a president willing to use the full Article 2 executive authority of the presidency to go after the regulators, to rescind regulations, to fire regulators who are putting in place job-killing regulations. That's what I intend to do. And removing the burdens of Washington on the people of North Dakota is going to allow people here to expand, farms to grow, small businesses to grow, more energy to be developed, wages to rise. Getting Washington off of our backs is critical to unleashing the economy. And you know what? We saw it with Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. And we're going to do the exact same thing of getting Washington off the backs of small business.
Last question for you. This race has been pretty ugly. I don't need to tell you, right? And a lot of people we hear from, they're saying, how do you ever unify after this, right? I mean, is it possible? Can you do it? And are you just doing such damage? I mean, I know good, faithful conservative Republicans who say there's no way we can win in November. You can't repair this. Are they wrong?
We are going to win in November. And listen, it has gotten ugly. It's gotten nasty. And unfortunately, I can't control it if another candidate decides to go personal, to go nasty, to go ugly, to engage in insults, to yell and scream and curse, to attack someone's family, to attack someone's wife. That is wrong. It's disgusting. It has no place in politics. I can't control what another candidate does. What I can control is what I do. And throughout the entire course of this campaign, I've not responded in kind. You've never heard me insult or attack another candidate. You've never heard me attack anyone else's family, go into the gutter. And I think the people of North Dakota, I think the people of America, they expect that. They're interested in what are your solutions to our problems? How do we bring jobs back to America? How do we raise wages? How do we protect the Bill of Rights? How do we protect our religious liberty, our Second Amendment, our right to keep and bear arms? And how do we keep ourselves safe from radical Islamic terrorism? How do we utterly destroy ISIS? That's where my focus is, and I think it's one of the reasons, number one, why I've survived in this campaign so long and become the leading competitor to Donald Trump with a head-to-head choice, is because I've kept the focus on the issues. When he's attacked me and insulted me, I have not responded in kind, and I'm not going to. I think that also sets the stage for uniting the party, because we can unite behind a shared vision. And I would note one real evidence of that unity. Of the 17 candidates who started, 5 of them now are supporting my campaign. Rick Perry, Carly Fiorina, Lindsey Graham, Jeb Bush, and Scott Walker. Now that is a tremendous array of ideological diversity, of diversity across this country, and it's a sign of the Republican Party coming together. When you include people like Senator Mike Lee and Mark Levin, you've got the full ideological spectrum, and that's what it's going to take to win. That was the old Reagan coalition, and it's what we're seeing. And I'll tell you, we are beating Hillary Clinton. You want something encouraging? Just last week, Fox News came out with a national poll, showed me beating Hillary Clinton by 3 points, 47 to 44. But here's something that's particularly encouraging. Among young people, I'm beating Hillary Clinton by 14 points, double digits. Last two elections, Barack Obama won young people 70 to 30. If the Democrat is losing young people by double digit, they cannot win. And people are ready for a change. They're hungry for a change. They recognize the Obama-Clinton economy is a disaster. And what we're seeing is Republicans coming together behind our positive, optimistic, principled campaign. We can turn this country around, and we can do it if we come together.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.